Welcome, everyone. I just want to do another audio check. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, if I fade, just wave and I'll augment the volume again. Welcome to everybody this time. My name is Mel Chen and I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Sexual Culture here on campus, which is hosting this conference. I'm also an associate professor of gender and women's studies here at UC Berkeley. This gathering was dreamed up about 1 year ago with Cssc's board members, and I'll just say any errors are my own, especially Carl Brito, Nadia Ellis, Michael Lucy, and Juana Maria Rodriguez. Also, student organizers in the spring of last year added some dream names and wishes and various elements. And so what you are seeing is the culmination of a number of people's dreams and wishes. I want to say a bit about Cssc and its mission as well. Cssc was founded in 2001 with the mission of emphasizing humanities research, interdisciplinary humanities research in sexuality studies with attention paid to the histories of sexuality. We support research and critical conversations concerning sexuality, sexual culture, and their mutually determining relationship to institutions, social practices and norms, and modes of representation. And we draw from a broad field of scholarship in which sexuality is found, which is everywhere, to participate in discussions as far-reaching as reproductive control and rights, heredity, marriage, nationalism, welfare systems, property, adoption, animal ethnographies, colonial imaginaries and administrations, performance, language norms, gendered ways and styles, disability politics and culture, materialities, and more. And I think Cssc has a growing mission in these times, one that is ever more translocal, ever more urgent, if the multi-layered alt-right attacks on various populations that came home to the UC Berkeley's campus this last fall were any indication. I want to give you some prefatory logistic and conceptual comments. I've learned from and credit disability community and studies conferences for modeling what UC set out in this conference. Please take note, if you would, of the fragrance-free policy, and also do know we have ADA conforming and gender-neutral restrooms here. We also have a quiet restroom as well as a lactation room. We have a resting sofa in the atrium, to which you all have every right to use. Please, when you are in this space, make yourselves as comfortable as you need. Move around, lie down, stand up, rock, whatever you need to do to make yourself comfortable in this space. So these are grave times, but the point has been made repeatedly that we have always been in grave times, particularly with the growth of colonial and neo-colonial fervor and contamination, the intensity of local and microcosmic trauma, the violence of nationalist or corporate sovereignties against indigenous ones, the claim of alt-right thinkers to old forms of thinking and historical willed ignorance, such that feminism, anti-racism, anti-transphobic, and queer perspectives are seen as at once frivolous and anti-American. In light of history, presentisms, a word introduced to me by my former professor Carolyn Dinshaw many years ago, anything is liable to presentism, the thought that something is only of the moment, that queerness is only of the 20th and 21st centuries, for example, or just a feature of modern life, rather than thinking of these terms we use as part of a really, really long game. There are competing ownerships. Sexuality studies might help name a broader and longer game. At the same time, we can acknowledge that queer studies has thought hard and beautifully about questions of race, sexuality, coloniality, and there's real purchase to calling forth precisely queerness from these sites specifically. Presentism and crisis together say, don't worry about history, and those just out of sight, and those unnameable even by the bureaucratic imagination of diversity. We have to deal most urgently with what is now. As my colleague Sue Schweik shared one day, after the earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, several years ago, Decisions were made to overlook disability access standards because rebuilding was most urgent. Around the world, including here, we see economic and social drivers of the necropolitical, that is, the exercise of power over death rather than life. With every crisis and with every hacked or crafted renewal, what bodies enter the discard pile? The ignorant disregard for complexity and the willful acts of murder throw our beloveds and our allies and us into a dust heap. But complexity is also simplicity. Those of us living at the intersections know that it's not all that complicated to imagine. These intersections we map every day and become for others to figure out. Presentism crisis says not only don't worry for now about people of color, about the animals, about disabled folks, about anyone who can't get to the front of the line or see themselves at the front of that line. If racial capitalism moves to entrench itself further, what will be its resources? Where is sexuality in all this? It's often nowhere ostensible for those trained not to see it for what it is, but legible everywhere for those of us who are looking. The people in this group doing history know all the ways that archives and rethinking how they are defined matter. Regrowth depends on the politics of reproduction, of both human and inhuman, animate and inanimate, environment and context, and of course, capital. Imaginations of futures animate and expel member bodies as defined by biomedical fitness. But sexual cultures can be, in their ingenuity, their resourcefulness, their resistant craftiness, their witchiness, and their uncommon solidarities, powerfully dangerous. And as our conference call mentions, there's also pleasure, revolutionary pleasure, fugitive pleasure, and also just pleasure. There's the yes and the no. There's the play and the not play. There's the real and also the imagination. Ev'ryBody this time, like many things or events, is a failure of representation, and an investment in something else. Quoting from the call, our apostrophe in every calls to a multitude of bodies, recognizing the potential for thinking through, substituting, revisioning, and ultimately holding space for bodies that exceed legislation and disciplinarity. So what do we have for you? First, a beautiful array of presentations, both invited speakers and panelists who are here by competitive admission. Every single speaker has something truly fantastic to offer, and structurally, it is not possible to see all of them. We are doing our best to record these events. Thank you to our invited speakers, Tracy Liebert, Coley Driscoll, Allison Kafer, Awan Mance, Amber Musser, Margot Rivera-Weiss, Vivi Peacock, Gemma Romaine, Amy Suyoshi, Nayan Shah, Tina Takamoto, Omisheke Tinsley, Qian Wang, and Gloria Becker. We asked our invited speakers to feel free to flex a little bit, experiment a little bit, if they so wished. When I think about queerness, I think, of course, in some ways how very elaborate some queer subcultures are, but also how ready for surprise, how scrappy they can be, too. So what could be possible for thinking and doing sexuality together in spaces like this among an assembly of bodies? We have participatory workshops that are often blended into presentations, and I want to flag the ones that I know about. Presentations by Gemma Romaine, Holly Driscoll, and Chen Wang will be offering workshop elements in their appearances, and I certainly do hope you'll meet them where they are. And I think some of them are moving out of their comfort zones to do something more workshop-y, so please be up for that. I also want to especially thank 3 people for coming from afar to share their presence and thinking with us. Semi-afar, Tracy Liebert from Canada, Gemma Romaine from the UK, Gloria Becker from the Netherlands. Several of our panelists have also journeyed in, thank you for that. And in return, we'll continue this mission of trying to stretch transnationally and thinking extra locally from different centers. Please note that I'm executively abolishing introductions. I made this decision this morning thanks to my partner Julia, who just gave me this brilliant idea. There are many rituals of welcome and honoring our speakers and introductions. It's a fairly conventional one, but one I really wanted to do. And it involved very often a kind of extended reading of bios, right? But the truth is, and this is telling, we are understaffed. I received so many notes of regret from our graduate students who 10 years ago I think would not have been beset by the multitudinous kinds of labor demanded of them, but are most definitely demanded today, simply to be able to be students here at Berkeley. So I ask our speakers for their kind understanding and for us all to perform other acts of welcome, ritual and not, to our speakers and also to each other. Our co-participants are all of you, and I was so thankful to the outreach efforts of many of you that resulted in a large number of registrations from the general community and from local institutions and organizations. Welcome to all of you. You are helping us make a certain kind of dream real again. Food. In this time of food precarity at the university and certainly beyond, we'd like to feed you. So we have free food. And not just crap food either. Some of us live for delicious food, and so we will have lunches with gluten-free options on every day. Today, Thai food. I'm just taking time to tell you about this. Tomorrow, build your own bibimbap. Have you ever heard of that? Saturday, various salads, and Saturday night, catered hot food from Oakland's beloved Shandong restaurant, who has taken care of me since 1995. Guest Wi-Fi is open to all. Just look for Cal Visitor. In terms of digital exposure, please tweet. The tweet handle use the hashtag Ev'ryBody this time, but without the second E in everybody, right? Just as you've been keying in the conference website. You have also maybe noticed a monitor in the atrium showing a slideshow of images that are part of the conference. And thanks to our presenters for sharing those images with us. If you have additional images, please put image and credit or text in an email to Ev'ryBody PPT, everybodypowerpoint@gmail.com, and we'll try to add them as we go, given staffing time. Free gifts. We have 2 free samples from the just-to-be-released Butch coloring book from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's not the first of its kind, and no, Butch isn't a dinosaur. It's alongside non-binary, genderqueer, lesbian, and dyke, fag, crip, and more. Intergenerationality is part of honoring history and its endless and often unrecordable complexities. Along with the Butch coloring books, I have to mention our colored pencils, including some sets dedicated to diverse flesh tones. So think of those as embodied metaphors, perhaps, for what we're trying to achieve here. Refuge and making, going throughout the mornings every day of this conference with huge thanks to Julia Havard for helping create, envision, and moderate this, is the Crumple and Mend room, a room with paper, yarn, and ambiguous signs. And so I just here want to recognize the various modalities of learning, the pedagogies that are all around us that sometimes get neglected in the space of a university. Being able to be without virtuosic speech or constant cognitive activity, being able to ask serious questions and answer or address them in nonverbal ways. So that is a very serious part of our design. I want to thank our co-sponsors, African American Studies and African Diaspora Studies, the Arts Research Center, the Berkeley Center for New Media, the Center for Race and Gender, the Departments of Comparative Literature, English, French, and Gender and Women's Studies, the Haas Institute LGBTQ Equity Cluster, and the program in Critical Theory. I want to give personal thanks for Julia Bryan Wilson to being my intellectual partner in dreaming all of the dreams I have and in validating the things that I was hoping for, and in solving the problem of the introductions. Thanks also to Suzanne Lee Puma and Alisa Biaria. Alisa is not here because of sudden illness, and so I'm very sad that I can't bring her up to this stage. Both Suzanne and Alisa have been incredibly essential to the making of this conference and what it is. Alisa Biaria is a President's Postdoctoral Fellow in Gender and Women's Studies with a fresh PhD from Stanford in Philosophy, and is a member of a number of community-based projects, including Survived and Punished, which is organizing to end the criminalization of survival. Many of you have been in touch with her. Suzanne Puma, who has been our anchor person, is the graduate student researcher for Cssc, is also a visual artist and a graduate student in rhetoric. And I had this in a different draft, it disappeared, but no. Suzanne has been a total partner in realizing the certain kind of conference that I so wanted to have. I also want to thank Julia Havard for handling all 3 mornings of Crumple and Mend and for all her work as CSSC's previous GSR. And I want to thank all of our student volunteers and moderators. So thank you all so much. Okay, that's it for my closing comments. Immediately following this, and what you're all really here to see, is our incredible first panel at 10:45, and it has, I might say, the best title I've seen in a long time: Grubbiness, Abjection, and Other Weird Tastes. Okay, welcome all of you.